with the previous Hokage being brought back to life by Orochimaru and being under his control in the hopes to shed light on Sasuke questioning the ideals of a shinobi, the leaf hanging in the balance based off of the decision he makes. If it doesn't resolve his inner dispute, this will lead to Orochimaru using them to destroy the leaf. But what if Hashirama, learning of the war, didn't want to help Sasuke and wanted to head to the battlefield? With him breaking Orochimaru's control, could he be able to beat the remaining Hokage being controlled by Orochimaru? New to the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment down below. Shooting for 5K, let's get it. Beginning with Hashirama, who was touted as the strongest shinobi ever, as mentioned in the 4th data book that his appearance is unparalleled in bravery, and people called him the god of ninjas, also seen as the pinnacle of the shinobi world, with even just his Edo version that fought the 3rd Hokage, who was substantially weaker and didn't even go into Sage mode, was able to restrain Hiruzen, with this Hiruzen being seen as the strongest Kage at the time, beating over people like Inoki with his particle star, or even the Raikage, who was able to fight Minato, who was also seen as the god of shinobi when it comes to god-like speed, with even Tobirama, who was able to block one of his fire styles, what they're being called the strongest fire style jutsu. And obviously Hashirama being over his brother with later stronger Edo versions of each other. Tobirama was still backed down by his brother with them just riling up the chakra, and Tobirama seemingly backing down just off the pressure of the chakra. And we could even see that Hiruzen was still on the same ballpark with Orochimaru, with Orochimaru still needing the help from both Edo Hokage, and had to put Hiruzen in a mental distress state by fighting his old masters and his students. But Orochimaru flat out said that Itachi was weaker than him, and even younger Itachi was able to seemingly neg him. And we even see with Madara Uchiha someone who was seen as the Uchiha legend, the strongest ninja in his clan, with some statements saying he reigns supreme with his Mangekyo Sharingan and generally just better than Itachi in almost every way, with Obito just using his name was enough to make people scared and force the whole world to come together just to beat him, with Hashirama still being able to fight with him while alive even when he had the help from the Nine Tails, and even being able to overpower Susanoo, as well as it being amped up by the Nine Tails. Even with statements from Edo Madara, who was fighting the 5 Kage pretty easily mind you, and said that Hashirama is the only one that could stop him. Edo Hashirama was seen over all the reanimated Hokage, with the appearance of Jubito, with him conceding to him being below 10 Tails Jinchuriki, but the other Hokage pretty much in agreement with that, even with them saying if Hashirama absorbed his clones it still wouldn't matter, kind of showing they consider him being the only one that could take out Jubito, or would at least be the closest one to having a chance. We also see Madara was able to fight against the 5 Kage and use some of the Rinnegan abilities, and even had the same wood style as Hashirama, stated in the Naruto fanbook that it's a jutsu, that's a world of trees that breaks through the ground and violently emerges. Whoever steps inside can never get out. And then Hokage's ninjutsu that manipulates dimensions, and he was still fighting with Edo Madara while he was a weakened Edo as well, and at least on a somewhat even playing field, even while being able to dodge some of his attacks while in base. And his clones were also sent out while fighting him as well, and we didn't even see he also had the power with his wood style to restrict Madara's abilities with the Rinnegan, not mentioning all his wood golems and his wood Buddha statue, being stated that the bright tomorrow will never arrive for the people who receive the palms of judgment that falls mercilessly upon them, and also having healing so good that he doesn't even need to weave a sign, and has some of the largest chakra pool that we've seen in the series, with even KCM2 not being able to match him, with him even stating that KCM2 almost has just as much chakra as him when he shared it to the whole Shinobi Alliance, and with all his abilities getting boosted by Sage Mode, with him also having his wood clones as well, with Madara saying he was the only one who could see through his wood clones due to his Sharingan. Now with his speed being one of his underwhelming traits, he's definitely not slow, seen with him being able to catch Madara's Susanoo blade while he was alive, and when the Susanoo, we know that it's faster than the wielder, so even though this wasn't alive a Madara when it comes to Edo, he does have Sage Mode, which I would think would at least boost his stats to be close to his alive base counterpart, because we know that he caught the blade while in base, so you could say that he still would have the same reaction speeds while in Sage Mode at least. But if you don't want to say that, it really doesn't matter, but we do know that he will at least scale close to that feat while in Sage Mode. Now to figure out a general win con against the Edo Hokage, assuming Hashirama doesn't have a jutsu to seal him away, given that we saw that he was able to subdue Edo Madara but didn't have a jutsu to seal him and had to wait for the sealing team to come, Hashirama will either have to force Orochimaru to stop controlling them or have him release the Edo Tensei, and of course to do that he would have to momentarily stop them, which we've seen him having jutsu that can stop, hold, or even restrict movement, but could he actually do it? And one of the biggest problems for Hashirama would actually be Hiruzen here. In his old age he was seen as one of the strongest Hokage and strongest out of the 5 Kage, and this Hiruzen could at least be comparable to the alive live one that was able to push out the Nine Tails from the village, and this could be actually supported with him being over some of the high tier characters in the war, like being seen over at least the 5 Kage that fought Madara, and these 5 Kage will be arguably stronger than the 5 Kage that Hiruzen was already stronger than when he was alive, with him being seen over people like Tsunade when they were going against the White Zetsu and the Wood Golem, with literally nobody not knowing what to do, but Hiruzen was able to step in and seemingly be able to combat the jutsu that was thrown at the Shinobi Alliance. And we saw that alive, Hiruzen was able to force a Orochimaru, a younger one, to retreat, and that version being a few years after the Nine Tails attack. And we know Orochimaru would go on to get just bodied by a base Sharingan Itachi, and we know that base Sharingan Itachi around this time scales past the Sannin, so you obviously just at that time, him being even older than the Nine Tails attack will still be at least seen over that younger version of Orochimaru, putting him at least in the same ballpark of over the Sannin, at least around that time. And he ends up finally attacking the village and fighting Third Hokage. And one of the misgivings about this fight is that Hiruzen was put in a situation where he was mentally nerfed by Orochimaru. Not only was the third in like a stupor-like state because of him fighting his student, which we know that happens when we see most masters fighting their student, with what happened to Jiraiya, or even what happened with Kakashi bringing this up when he was fighting Sasuke, or even with Minato finding out what happened with Obito. It usually tends to happen when somebody comes in contact with their student in battle. It does kind of hit home for them, at least in their mind, slowing down their movements, making them not really fight the same they would. So it's pretty safe to say that Hiruzen would be in the same boat, and then he was able to drive Hiruzen even more deeper into a mental darkened state when he reanimated his past masters to fight him, and didn't really even come in contact with him during the fight. It was really just the reanimations doing all the work for Orochimaru. And the anime kind of does a good job showing the emotion behind how Hiruzen felt, with him crying off of just seeing the sight of his dead masters. So it would be safe to say he was not at his best within this fight, mentally as well as fighting, as well as physically, with him just making a few shadow clones, and that was at risk of shortening his life. With him being in war, being able to make 5 clones, and all of them being able to equal the Wood Golem and White Zetsu's attack, and him being able to fight against Jubito, as well as just show him being in better standing while as an Edo, being able to fight and devise plans while also fighting in tandem with Tobirama and Hashirama, with his Edo body having access to all the jutsu in the leaf and no stamina worries, honestly having some better showings in the war than some of the other Kage at some points. He was able to save Naruto from the divine tree when Minato or Tobirama couldn't, as well as fighting against the Wood Style Golem and White Zetsu and the whole Shinobi Alliance, and even some Kage that were there present couldn't do anything, with even Shikamaru saying if the third goes down, they're pretty much cooked. And this was Shikamaru who devised multiple plans during the war to pretty much save them. And even if you say Hiruzen still isn't that much stronger than his alive counterpart because of the Edo, he would still be comparable to somebody like Tobirama, at least in everything besides speed, with him being able to save Naruto from the binds. But again, Tobirama or Edo Minato couldn't save him. But personally, I would put Edo Hiruzen over Edo Tobirama, at least everything except for speed. Now, Tobirama was seen close to Minato, and in some cases you can even get him close to being to KCM to Minato, with him being able to react to the attack from Obito when Minato couldn't, and successfully do tandem attacks with Minato. But like I said previously, Minato was in like a stupor like state, not mentally in the battle, so you could say he wasn't operating to the best he could during the exchange they had with Obito. But while alive, he was seen as a direct rival to Madara's brother until he broke out the Flying Thunder God. And before Madara got EMS, he was pretty much equal to his brother, or maybe a little bit over, just like how Hashirama was a little bit over Tobirama. But we know it was pretty much implied a lot of times that Hashirama was stronger than Tobirama, with even in the war after Obito was paired to launch his attack while in the burial, we see Tobirama ask where is his elder brother. Tobirama still was able to cause Orochimaru plus EMS Sasuke to quicken their boots with just building up his chakra against Hashirama. And by this point, EMS Sasuke would be over somebody like Orochimaru and anybody else in the room besides the Hokage. EMS Sasuke was seen equal to Itachi or even over Itachi, who was able to fight against KCM1 Naruto, and just at near death, you know, with the illness, literally blind, was able to use his Totsuka blade to be able to absorb the strongest version of Orochimaru that we've seen, and even just in base Sharingan was able to give base B some trouble as well. So with Tobirama being there, it would be room for more chances of tandem attacks with this reanimation bomb jutsu, and him even using the Hokage as bombs to given that they're Edos that could potentially overwhelm Hashirama. Not to mention Tobirama fighting with Hashirama pretty much his whole life. He had the best grasp on his abilities, with him staying it when he did the attack with Sage Mode Naruto. And we know that in speed, Tobirama was faster than Hashirama, with Madara even saying Tobirama used to boast about being the fastest shinobi of his time. And given that, you know, Madara would step around the same time, it would had to be around the time of the Warren era, at least, or at the end of it. And that was when Tobirama, Hashirama, and Madara were all alive and active. So we could assume that this was when Hashirama was present and Tobirama was still bragging about being the fastest of his era. So it at least made sense that he's faster than Hashirama, and I feel like that's pretty much a staple given that, you know, it's Tobirama with the flying Raijin, so it just would make sense off of the feats that we've seen with him being able to fight against, you know, a live Madara. The same alive Madara was able to pretty much destroy the tail beast as well as Naruto as well as Sasuke in combat. So it just would make sense that he would just have better body flicker, and with his flying Raijin obviously being faster. But not saying that Tobirama just would blitz Hashirama like it's no tomorrow, but we definitely knew though he has the edge in speed. Now Minato in just base while alive was already seen as the god of Shinobi when it comes just to speed. With a younger Hiruzen 12 years prior to the series was finally Nine Tails, but still asking for Minato's help. With even Edo Minato, after being weak in the war from losing his arm and also draining his chakra and his Kyuubi cloak, was still able to fight right next to a war art Kakashi, with the Kakashi being able to fight against a Obito in a taijutsu fight without the use of Kamui and the Kamui dimension, with Tobirama even stating that Minato is better than him at teleportating and striking speed. Minato will be there to add support to the Mitch as well as using his own flying Raijin, and we even seen in the war they can combine their jutsu to be able to teleport each other around and do reverse flying Raijin jutsu. Now Minato is one of the Hokage who actually got stronger due to his hypothetical, but with Hashirama being there, you know, the literal king of controlling Biju with his wood style, Minato's Kurama avatar might do more harm than good, but it could be noted it would be hard for him to get trapped in his wood style, with Minato being able to teleport, with Hashirama being there as well. So it's possible as long as Minato doesn't go into his avatar, he should be straight. We saw that Naruto was able to get out of it while going against Madara by just, you know, taking away his avatar, but you could argue that given that Minato isn't really fighting from his thinking, his Orochimaru control him, you could argue that once Minato even taps into the Nine Tails chakra, or if you could even argue that if Minato pulls out his avatar, that it's over then. But with him having teleportation, it would be kind of hard for Hashirama to catch him still unless he's in his avatar, but that's really up for debate. So could Hashirama be able to solo the remaining Hokage? Now one of the most important things here to take into consideration is that there are going to be two flying Raijin users that both can use shadow clones and have near unlimited chakra, and there's also going to be two Hokage that have the means to seal him away with the Reaper Death Seal, and Orochimaru knows of them both having it as well. Not to mention him probably having a good grasp on Hiruzen's jutsu, given that he was the reason why Orochimaru thought jutsu was power and all power in the ninja world. Plus Hiruzen himself can also create clones just like Minato and Tobirama. The combinations here are actually pretty endless, with Minato marking Hashirama and Minato and Tobirama using this to get his continuous bomb jutsu in place, so it could cause some damage as well as Hiruzen being there to apply backup as well, with his staff having enough power to be able to break the divine tree vines. And we even saw Tobirama was able to go against any live Madara briefly in close quarters combat, with Madara having to dodge his attacks but just letting the EMS Sasuke hit him point blank. So it is out of this world to say that Minato plus Tobirama, with them both using Fly Raijin in tandem, with them having a mark on Hashirama, would be able to overwhelm Hashirama. And even if you want to say he could just use the 1000 Oran Buddha statue, if he gets marked, it really doesn't matter, given that Tobirama and Minato could just kind of teleport right up there where he's at. It really wouldn't matter, and I don't even really think it would really just hit them if they just teleported away or just ended up teleporting to other markers around the battlefield. They would have to be standing still or subdued by one of Tobirama's jutsus, like the Heaven Deity Gates, or being wrapped up in a wood style jutsu, or being restricted. And again, with the flying Raijin, I just don't think they would be standing still still like how Madara was with him being in his Susanoo while it's encased in the Nine Tails. There is some win conditions for Hashirama with his wood style being able to restrict people's chakra. You could argue that Hiruzen being the slowest could get trapped and restricted, and like I said previously, with Hashirama having his power to subdue Biju, you could say Minato gets caught up in his wood style and drains the Nine Tails eventually, and eventually Minato's chakra. And there's also his wood clones, but I personally really don't think they matter given that all the other Hokage can make clones as well, and the wood clones does make the main host weaker too. So if he has clones spread out around the battlefield, his full main power as a host really wouldn't be all that powerful unless he absorbs them back into his main body. But they still are pretty strong and sturdy, but it just wouldn't make sense for him to limit his power, and then the other Hokage could just make clones to fight those wood clones, and it would just still make the fight the same way. And we already know in the speed category he's definitely lacking, with somebody like Minato already being faster than every Hokage there, and adding Tobirama to the mix, it does make it worse. The only thing really working for Hashirama here is if he can restrict one of them. Once the numbers drop to 2, it could be possible for Hashirama to come on top if he uses his wood clones against the remaining like Tobirama or Minato, or potentially Tobirama and Hiruzen. But I would most likely lean to the Hokage being able to send him away more times than not, because at the end of the day they're not alive, so none of the attacks that Hashirama does against them would be able to kill them. He would have to literally subdue them all, which he can do, but you have to do this also while looking out for being tagged by Minato or Tobirama, as well as not getting sealed by Hiruzen or Minato, as well as worrying also about Tobirama with all his jutsu and the Tandem attacks, his water style, as well as Hiruzen with all his jutsus, and being able to create clones that can put out the same type of jutsus or every other chakra nature as well, with Minato also being just as fast or faster than Tobirama as well, even in just base. It would be kind of hard for Hashirama to be able to pull this off. Now obviously if they were all alive, I would definitely lean to Hashirama, given that he could actually kill them one by one and would just be overall more stronger and not suppressed by his Edo state. But in this Edo part, it's just kind of really going against him, with Hiruzen being stronger than he was while he was alive, and Minato and Tobirama being there to have some of the best tag teams that we've seen in the war arc, with them pretty much being in sync in almost every panel they were in, and just understanding their jutsu better than anybody obviously. So it would just make it really hard on Hashirama, but there is definitely situations where he could win. Like how I said, if he restrains one of them or even restrains 2 of them, he could be able to take the fight, but I just don't really see that happening, with him getting potentially marked by Tobirama or Minato, and that right there just seals a deal for just multiple tandem attacks to happen, and just ends up getting sealed away by either Hiruzen or Minato with the Reaper Death. But if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment down below, as well as watch my other content. Stay blessed. I love you all. We out.